Everything modern agriculture teaches you about maximizing yield, medieval peasants with no tractors, no fertilizers, no science were already doing it better. One technique they used is so counterintuitive, farmers today call it impossible, yet it worked every single time. Why did we forget this? Let's start with the trick that sounds completely made up. Medieval gardeners grew fresh vegetables in the dead of winter. No greenhouses, no electricity, no heating bills, just horse poop. Seriously, they dug pits about 2 feet deep, filled them with fresh horse manure, then topped everything with 8 inches of soil. And here's where it gets interesting. That manure started decomposing and generated temperatures up to 140 degrees inside. Hot enough to burn your hand if you stuck it in there. But at the root level, a perfect 70 to 80 degrees. Basically, a heated blanket for seeds. Monks figured this out centuries ago. While everyone else waited for spring, they were eating fresh salad greens in January, in England, where it rains sideways and the sun apparently takes winter vacations. The heat lasted 6 to 8 weeks, plenty of time to get seedlings strong enough to survive transplanting outdoors. And when one batch of manure cooled down, they just built another bed. Free heat all season long. Now, I know what you're thinking. Great, but I don't have a horse living in my backyard. Fair point. Here's the workaround. Grass clippings mixed with coffee grounds create the same chemical reaction. Not quite as hot, but enough to matter. Your local coffee shop probably throws away pounds of grounds every day. Ask nicely and they'll hand them over. Trust me, I've done this. The barista looked at me weird, but my tomato seedlings didn't care. A properly built hotbed extends your growing season by 4 to 6 weeks on each end. That's 2 extra months of growing, 2 extra months of harvests from something your great-great-great-grandparents knew how to build. Modern farmers spend thousands on heated greenhouses. Medieval peasants spent nothing and got the same results. Makes you wonder what else they figured out that we forgot. Speaking of forgotten knowledge, the next trick involves something you look at almost every night, and medieval farmers believed it controlled everything in their gardens. The moon. Medieval farmers were obsessed with it. They refused to plant a single seed without checking what the moon was doing first. Sounds like superstition, right? Like believing your horoscope tells you when to buy groceries, except they were onto something real. Here's how it worked. During a waxing moon, when that bright disk grows bigger each night, they planted everything that produces above ground. Lettuce, tomatoes, beans. During a waning moon, when it shrinks toward darkness, they planted root crops. Carrots, potatoes, onions. Their logic was simple. The moon pulls ocean tides. Why wouldn't it pull water and soil too? Turns out, they weren't crazy. Researchers at Germany's University of Hohenheim actually tested this. They found measurable differences in germination rates between moon phases. Plants started during the right lunar window sprouted faster and stronger than those planted randomly. The gravitational pull genuinely affects soil moisture. During full moons, water rises slightly toward the surface. During new moons, it settles deeper. Root vegetables planted 2 to 3 days before a new moon develop stronger root systems because the energy and moisture flow downward. Leafy greens planted just after a new moon catch that rising moisture wave and push out more leaves. My grandfather swore by this stuff. I thought he was just old-fashioned until I tried it myself. Same seeds, same soil, different moon phases. The difference wasn't dramatic, but it was there. Enough to make me feel slightly guilty for all the eye-rolling I did as a teenager. The beautiful part? This costs nothing. Medieval monks kept handwritten almanacs tracking lunar cycles. You can download a free app in 30 seconds. Same ancient knowledge delivered to your pocket. Will moon planting double your harvest? Probably not, but stacking small advantages is exactly how medieval gardeners squeezed more food from less land. Every edge mattered when your family's survival depended on it. And speaking of stacking advantages, the next trick involves planting 3 specific crops together. Crops that feed each other while they feed you. 3 plants, 1 bed, 0 wasted space. The Three Sisters method sounds like a gardening fairy tale. Corn, beans, and squash planted together in the same mound, somehow producing more food than if you gave each crop its own separate row. Medieval Europeans thought it was witchcraft when they first heard about it from traders who'd crossed the Atlantic. Turns out it's just really clever botany. Here's the deal. Corn is a greedy plant. It sucks nitrogen out of soil like a teenager drains the refrigerator. Normally, you'd need to add fertilizer constantly or watch your corn turn yellow and pathetic. But beans have a superpower. Their roots host bacteria that pull nitrogen straight from the air and pump it into the soil. Free fertilizer delivered exactly where the corn needs it. The corn doesn't even have to ask. And what does the corn give back? A climbing pole. Beans naturally want to grow upward toward light. Instead of building trellises, which takes time and wood and effort, medieval gardeners just let the beans spiral up the corn stalks. The corn doesn't mind. It's sturdy enough to handle the weight. Now, here's where squash enters like that friend who somehow makes every group project better. Those giant squash leaves spread across the ground like living mulch. They shade the soil, keeping it cool and moist during scorching summer days. Weeds can't push through, and the slightly prickly vines, raccoons and other critters hate walking on them. 3 plants, each solving a problem the others create. Modern agricultural trials confirm what indigenous farmers knew centuries ago. 3 Sisters plots produce up to 30% more calories per acre than growing these crops separately. That's not a small edge. That's the difference between feeding your family and watching them go hungry. The nutritional bonus is almost unfair. Corn and beans together form a complete protein. Add squash for vitamins, and you've got a balanced meal growing in one mound. But medieval gardeners had another fertilizer source, one that sounds disgusting, one that worked embarrassingly well. Okay, let's talk about pee. Medieval gardeners called it chamber lye. We call it the thing you flush away without thinking. They called it liquid gold. And honestly, they weren't wrong. Human urine contains nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. The exact same stuff you pay $15 a bag for at the garden center. The ratio sits around 11:1:2. That's better than some commercial fertilizers I've bought, but here's the thing. You couldn't just dump fresh urine on your cabbages and call it a day. Medieval gardeners were smarter than that. They collected urine in sealed clay pots and let it age for several weeks. Sounds gross, smells worse, but the aging process killed off pathogens and converted the nitrogen into a stable form plants could actually absorb. Then came the dilution. 1 part aged urine, 10 parts water. Pour it directly onto the soil around your plants, never on the leaves themselves. The leaves would burn, the roots would feast. Modern science backs this up completely. Researchers in Finland ran trials comparing tomatoes grown with diluted human urine against unfertilized tomatoes. The urine-fed plants produced 4 times more fruit. 4 times. That's not a marginal improvement. That's the difference between a handful of tomatoes and enough to can for winter. The trick works especially well on nitrogen-hungry crops. Corn loves it. Squash practically begs for it. Leafy greens turn darker and grow faster. I'll be honest, I tried this in my own garden 3 years ago. It felt ridiculous sneaking out with a watering can at 6 in the morning. But my spinach that year, biggest leaves I've ever grown. My neighbor asked what fertilizer I was using. I changed the subject. Medieval peasants had no shame about it. They viewed bodily waste as a resource, not garbage. Chamber pots weren't just for convenience. They were collection vessels for tomorrow's harvest. But urine wasn't the only smell-based trick in their playbook. Some plants naturally repel pests with their scent alone. Roses in a cabbage patch. Sounds like a gardening mistake, right? Medieval monks did it on purpose, and they were onto something we're only now rediscovering. See, pests don't have great eyesight. Most insects hunt by smell. A cabbage moth can detect a cabbage plant from over a mile away just by following the scent trail. That's impressive. Also terrifying if you're trying to grow brassicas. But here's where it gets clever. Plant something strong-smelling right next to your vegetables, and suddenly that moth can't find dinner. The signal gets scrambled. It's like trying to hear someone whisper in a rock concert. Marigolds became the medieval gardener's secret weapon. Those bright orange flowers produce a scent so pungent that aphids and whiteflies basically short-circuit. Studies show marigolds planted near tomatoes can reduce pest populations by up to 90%. 90%. Without spraying a single thing. Then there's basil and tomatoes. Monks noticed that basil planted alongside tomatoes kept hornworms away. Those fat green caterpillars that can strip a plant overnight, they hate basil. But the weird part is, gardeners also swore the tomatoes tasted better. For centuries, people dismissed this as superstition. Turns out the basil actually reduces stress hormones in the tomato plant, which changes the fruit's flavor compounds. Medieval monks were right. Science just took 500 years to catch up. My favorite trick involves nasturtiums, those pretty orange and yellow flowers with the peppery leaves. Medieval gardeners planted them as sacrificial lambs. Aphids absolutely love nasturtiums, love them more than anything else in your garden. So the bugs feast on the nasturtiums while your peas and beans grow untouched. It's basically offering the pest buffet a better restaurant across the street. Carrots and onions work even better together. Carrot flies hate onion smell. Onion flies hate carrot smell. Plant them in alternating rows and both pests fly off confused. No sprays, no powders, no money spent. But pest control wasn't the only free resource medieval gardeners found underground. Some buried treasure that kept giving all season long. Fish heads. Sounds like something you'd throw away. Medieval gardeners called it buried gold. Here's what coastal monks figured out centuries ago. Dig a hole about 12 inches deep. Drop in a fish head. Cover it up. Plant your tomato right on top. That's it. That's the whole trick. But why does it work so well? A single fish head packs nitrogen, phosphorus, and calcium into one slimy package. Those are the three things plants devour most. It's basically a slow-release vitamin sitting right where roots can find it. And the key word there is slow release. Surface fertilizers wash away with the first heavy rain. Fish buried deep, that nutrition stays put. The head breaks down gradually over months, feeding your plant exactly when it gets hungry. My grandfather used to say good fertilizer should work like a savings account, not a spending spree. He wasn't wrong. The 12-inch depth matters too. Any shallower and your neighbor's cat becomes your worst enemy. Every raccoon within 3 counties shows up for dinner. Trust me on this one. Now, here's what surprised researchers. Tomato plants grown over buried fish develop stems twice as thick as normal. They produce ripe fruit 2 to 3 weeks earlier. Same variety, same sun, same water. The only difference was the fish underneath. Native Americans taught European colonists this trick for corn, but monks in coastal monasteries had already stumbled onto the same discovery independently. Great minds think alike, I guess, or maybe desperate gardeners figure things out fast. Don't have fresh fish? Canned sardines past their expiration date work fine. Fish emulsion from the garden center does the job too. Even shrimp shells from last night's dinner qualify. The smell disappears within a week once everything's buried. Your garden won't attract bears. Probably. One fish head feeds a heavy feeding plant all season long. No reapplication needed. No bags to buy. But fish heads weren't the only things medieval gardeners buried. Some put entire logs underground. And what happened next changed everything about watering. Buried logs. Sounds like laziness. Medieval German farmers called it genius. Here's what they discovered by accident. Dig a trench about 2 feet deep. Throw in old logs, branches, whatever wood you've got lying around. Pile soil on top. Plant your vegetables. Then watch what happens when your neighbor's garden turns crispy in August while yours stays green. The wood acts like an underground sponge. A single rotting log can hold 300% of its weight in water. That's not a typo. 300%. During dry spells, plant roots find that buried reservoir and drink from it. No hose required, no sprinkler system, just wood doing what wood does when it breaks down. I tried this 3 years ago with some oak branches from a storm, forgot about that bed entirely during a 2-week vacation. Came home expecting plant corpses, found the healthiest zucchini I'd ever grown. My wife thought I was exaggerating. She doesn't doubt me anymore. But here's what makes this trick even better. Decomposing wood releases heat. Not enough to cook anything, but enough to keep soil a few degrees warmer during cool nights. Your plants basically get a heated waterbed. And the nutrients, as that wood breaks down over years, it feeds your soil slowly. Fungi move in, beneficial bacteria multiply, the whole underground ecosystem comes alive. One catch though, fresh wood steals nitrogen temporarily. The microbes breaking it down hog all the good stuff for themselves, greedy little things. The solution? Use wood that's already been sitting around for a year. Punky, soft, half-rotten stuff works best, the kind that crumbles when you poke it. Germans called this Hugelkultur, which roughly translates to mound culture. Fancy name for burying your yard waste instead of hauling it to the dump. These beds improve every single year. First season is good, 5th season is incredible. The wood keeps decomposing, keeps holding water, keeps feeding roots. Speaking of timing, medieval gardeners didn't just think about what to plant. They obsessed over when, and their solution was simpler than you'd expect. Wind kills gardens, not dramatically like frost or hail, slowly, invisibly, like a thief stealing water right through the leaves. Medieval farmers figured this out the hard way. They noticed vegetables on the edge of fields always looked worse than ones in the middle. Stunted, dried out. Sad little things. So they built walls, but not with stone. They planted tall crops in strips next to short ones. Corn here, lettuce there, sunflowers on the outside, tender green sheltered behind them. Simple idea, brilliant results. A strong wind can rob your plants of 20 to 30% of their potential yield. That's not a guess. Agricultural researchers measured it. Wind forces leaves to close their pores, which stops photosynthesis. It also sucks moisture out faster than roots can replace it. Your plants are basically dying of thirst on a windy day, even if the soil is wet. But put a living wall of tall plants on the windward side, everything changes. The sheltered zone stays calmer, warmer at night, cooler during scorching afternoons. It's like the tall plants create their own little weather system for the short ones. Here's what I love about this trick. The windbreak crops weren't just standing there looking pretty. Medieval farmers used Jerusalem artichokes and sunflowers because they produced food too. Double duty, no wasted space. Makes sense, right? And the water savings are real. Plants behind a windbreak lose about 25% less moisture through their leaves. That means less watering for you, less stress for them. I tried this last summer with a row of tall tomatoes blocking the prevailing wind. My basil behind them stayed lush and green. The basil on the exposed side looked like it had given up on life by July. You don't need fancy equipment. Just think about where your wind comes from. Plant something tall there first, let it grow into a shield. Now, windbreaks solve one problem, but medieval gardeners had another obsession that modern growers completely ignore, timing their plantings in a way that seems almost obsessive. Medieval gardeners didn't plant like we do. We buy a packet of lettuce seeds, dump them all in the ground on a Saturday morning, and call it done. Then, 3 weeks later, 40 heads of lettuce ready at the exact same moment. You eat salad for breakfast. You force salad on your neighbors. You watch perfectly good lettuce rot because no human family can consume that much roughage in a week. Medieval peasants couldn't afford that kind of waste. They had mouths to feed and no refrigerators to preserve anything. So they got clever. Really clever. They planted the same crop every 14 days, small batches, spaced out through the entire growing season. Sounds almost too simple, doesn't it? But the results were remarkable. Instead of one overwhelming harvest, they got a steady trickle of fresh food for months. Their gardens were half the size of their neighbors' plots. Yet they ate better, wasted less, worked smarter. Here's something nobody talks about. This method was also insurance. A late frost in May kills your first planting? No problem. The batch you planted 2 weeks later survives. Hailstorm in June, you've still got seeds in the ground that haven't sprouted yet. My grandmother used to say putting all your eggs in one basket is fine until you trip. Medieval farmers knew this instinctively, and there's a science angle too. Lettuce planted all at once bolts together when summer heat arrives. Every single head turns bitter within the same week. But lettuce planted in succession, some of it always catches the cool weather just right. Radishes work the same way. So do beans, spinach, and carrots. I started doing this 3 years ago. Now I harvest fresh lettuce from April through October without ever having more than I can eat. My neighbor plants everything on Memorial Day weekend and complains about feast or famine every single year. The trick is embarrassingly simple. Mark your calendar. Plant a small row. Wait 2 weeks. Repeat. But successive planting wasn't the only timing trick medieval gardeners obsessed over. They also figured out how to cheat space itself by growing full-size fruit trees in areas smaller than a closet. Stone walls changed everything. Medieval gardeners figured out that a south-facing wall acts like a giant battery. All day long, the stone soaks up heat from the sun. Then at night, it releases that warmth right back into the air around it. Problem was, regular fruit trees take up way too much space. An apple tree spreads 15 feet wide. Most peasants didn't have that kind of room, so they invented something brilliant. They trained fruit trees to grow completely flat against walls, like living posters. The technique is called Espalier. And honestly, it sounds harder than it actually is. You just prune the branches to grow horizontally along wires instead of letting them bush out naturally. Here's where it gets interesting. A flat-trained tree can produce a full harvest in a space only 12 inches deep. 12 inches. That's narrower than most kitchen counters. My father-in-law tried this 5 years ago with an apple tree against his garage. His wife thought he'd lost his mind. Now he picks more apples from that one flat tree than his neighbor gets from 3 normal ones. The secret isn't just space savings. When branches grow flat, every single leaf gets equal sunlight. No shaded areas, no weak spots. The fruit ripens evenly and develops more sugar because the plant isn't wasting energy on branches that barely produce. But the real magic happens during frost season. Late spring frosts kill more fruit harvests than any disease or pest. One cold night in May wipes out an entire year's crop. Happens all the time. Medieval monks used Espalier to grow peaches and apricots in England. Peaches in England. These fruits need Mediterranean warmth to survive, yet monks harvested them in climates that had no business growing such things. The wall made it possible. That stored heat protected delicate blossoms through dangerous cold snaps that destroyed fruit on freestanding trees nearby. You can do this against any fence or wall with simple wire supports. Full-sized fruit from a space smaller than a parking spot. 10 tricks. 10 ways to grow more with less. Medieval gardeners figured this out centuries ago using nothing but observation and common sense. Maybe it's time we remembered what they knew.